Start
Okay.
that. Perfect. All right. If anything comes up as we're going through this and you have to stop for anything, let me just stop and I'll, re-ask the question. Or if you don't like the answer, I will redo it. It's not a big deal. I wanted to start with this. Going back and looking at your background, you started in radio. I know that we had talked a long time ago about this, but you started in radio.
I did.
What was that like? I mean, did you get in because you wanted to be a journalist?
If you go back really far, I was in high school and I was babysitting, and I turn on the TV and I see a classmate reading the news. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I want to try that. And I think I might have been like a freshman or something, 15 years old. And I like had to muster up courage to walk up to this confident older girl and ask her and tap her on the shoulder while she was at her locker. And I asked her, I saw you. What is that? Is that something that I can do? I'm really interested in it. And she referred me to the drama teacher, believe it or not.
Wow.
And I walk in, I meet the drama teacher, Dr. Vardanian, and she was like wonderful. Like she was excited that somebody was wanting to be part of this. And she thrust me in there. I might have been a sophomore. And for the next 3 years, sophomore, junior, senior, I was like running around gathering 5 minutes of news, like whatever I could. I didn't know anything about anything. I just knew that I had to have some news. And I would write my
Wow.
scripts on top of like, homework and everything else that's going on, part-time job and, high school. And every week somebody's mom would take us down. I lived in Southern California. They would take us down to Laguna Niguel, where they had like this cable station, and 4 other schools, or 5 of us, had 5 minutes. So every week we had a 30-minute broadcast, and I represented Mission Viejo High School on the local cable channel. And I'm like,
Wow.
golly, I want to do this for a
Nice.
living. And too many long stories. So I ended up at the local community college. I'm a very big advocate for community colleges before you go to a university. And Saddleback College, right there in my hometown of Mission Viejo, had the most amazing radio station and TV station. And the radio station was 88.5, and it went all over South Orange County. And that's a huge, huge area. And at the age of 18, I got thrust into radio. I had no interest in radio, but it was like, sure. And before you know it, they want me to anchor. It was part of the curriculum for broadcast journalism to anchor a newscast. And back in the day, before we were electronic the way we are now, we use these things called carts, and they look like eight track tapes, and you put them on this conveyor belt to erase them. And I guess I had a 5 minute one, and I must have recorded it umpteen times before I got a good take, because you had to have it good. It had to be perfect and crisp. So I'm doing the news, and we had AP wire copy, we had newspapers, we had stuff that we could rewrite, and got my scripts, and I did this newscast, and I had to hand it to the DJ. And I got in my car, and it was the weirdest experience. I'm in my little Honda Civic driving down Interstate 5 on my way home, and I heard myself on the air. And it was really weird. I almost crashed my car. But there I was, given the news, and it was like life changing. And one of the news directors they hired took a real liking to me. Her name was Dawn Camber, and she just got the ball rolling with me. She got me press passes. She sent me to presidential visits. She sent me to the Orange County Fair, and I had this strap-on uh, tape recorder with a microphone, and I was getting sound on the roller coaster, and just I was falling in love with the sound and going to strikes. I think there was a Pac Bell workers strike union thing, and all that beautiful, rich audio. I was putting stories together for her. We called them raps. I don't know if they still use that term today. And left her raps, and she'd play them in her newscasts. And
Wow.
it just opened up my world. And when I got to the university, the internships opened some doors. I got in the in the Los Angeles area, which is where Orange County is located. They had two big stations that did news that I was able to get in contact with, and I got a paid internship at KNX Radio.
Mm.
It's all news, and I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
No, 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 no. I'd be at work at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was a college girl. Like I had no
Wow.
life. It was like, I'm going to be the next so and so, my dream. And you're young and you're like, you're going to go change the world. And I wanted to be a reporter so bad. And golly, I loved that internship. And they paid you something. It was like $6, $7 an hour to write news.
Mm.
And there I was, a news writer every weekend for, I don't know, a couple of years. And I got a job also later on at KFI Radio, which is a news talk station.
Mm.
And these connections, long story short, led up to my first full-time job in Santa Barbara, and that's where it all started.
Wow. Is it from what I was reading, what the first 10 years or so of your career was radio?
Absolutely.
Wow. Did
Hmm.
you have, I mean,
I dreamt of being in television, but it was kind of like it took a turn.
right, right.
Mhm.
No, and I love your story how you got into TV. I want to ask you about that. But did you have early on a mentor, someone who was really, helping you out and showing you the ropes, showing you how to do this?
I feel like I had quite a few. If it wasn't professors,
Hmm.
I I had actual journalists in the field that I contacted and connected with. And one of them, for a college girl, this was super amazing, was a reporter anchor at KTLA in Los Angeles. And she's also well known here in Texas. Her name's Minerva Perez. And one day she took time out of her busy life, life of a journalist is busy. And she drove down to Cal State Fullerton and she met with me and she took me to lunch.
Wow.
Like that was big, big time. And I've stayed in touch with her over the years. She was like, I really think it's important to see people that look like us on the air.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even more so important as I've gotten older in positions of decision making or in management. But at that time, it
Hmm.
was important to see someone who looked like me, talked like me, understood me. Another one invited me into her station. Her name was Laura Diaz. She's a very famous news anchor in LA. And I spent the afternoon with her. She brought me into makeup, and then all of a sudden I left and I'm on the freeway and I hear about that big Loma Prieta earthquake. I think it was in 89,
Mm.
where the freeways collapsed on each other in Northern
Right.
California and Candlestick Park. And she immediately went on the air right after spending the afternoon with me. And the whole thing
Wow.
was live, like I'll never forget that day. But people like that made an impression on me. And then people like Don Camber were like in my life, and my professors really checking up on me, making sure that I got that job or that internship, or just really molding me. I think we all need people like that. And then as my career grew, I met more and more,
Hmm. Hmm.
and men and women who have made a mark on my life and gave me feedback. You really do need people like that.
You know what? I got to go back and I mean, there are certain people I certainly remember it there, and you got me thinking. There was one guy I met early on in my radio career, and I'm forgetting his name, but oh, he was a character. He really was an interesting character. And thank you for reminding me of carts, the old carts, because I used those as well. The reel to reels and the carts. Oh,
And
that
be real
was.
careful when you got a whole bunch of them and
Uh,
you're on your way into the room that you don't drop them.
oh no, no, don't even get me started. The memories I have with those things, definitely. The when you wanted to get into television,
Mhm.
what was it about television that was a draw for you? And then, I mean, how did you eventually finally get it?
I think it's just the power of the images. Like I love the part and miss it of being a radio journalist where I could draw a picture in people's minds. I could describe the defendant walking into the courtroom wearing his orange prison jumpsuit, walking slowly in shackles. You know, you can describe these things. You can describe the beautiful sunset coming up over the city landscape and the bird, you can hear the birds chirping. But sometimes with video, you hear it, you see it, it's moving. Television has a very important place in journalism. I think the written word, the television images, and radio and podcasting are all hugely important. But I wanted to tell those stories. And while you can hear someone's tears, you can hear someone's anger when you're listening to the radio in your car, and radio is very personal. There's also something about the silence, the pauses, or seeing the teardrop coming down the face. Just a different medium that I really wanted to explore.
So you're doing all this radio though. What was that moment when you finally get a shot at TV? How do you break in?
I was very social, as you know. And when you're working in a big market like Dallas Fort Worth, there is an incredible amount of people that show up to scenes where news is happening. Not even just local news. A place like Dallas Fort Worth brings in national news. And so I'm very networkish. That's just my personality. I make contacts. And a lot of the photographers were like, there's something about her. They're like, Sandra, you need to put together a demo. And so we got to talking, and some of them were handing me a tape, a Sandra tape. Here, every time you see me, I want you to shoot a stand up. And then they give me the tape back. So I started collecting some stand ups at things that weren't really what reporters were doing, but they would send a photographer to. But I thought, you know what, that's still video that I can work with. And I'm a really good storyteller because I'm doing it in North Texas for potentially millions of people. I can put a television story together. I have a nice voice. I'm a good storyteller. I'm a good writer. I think I can do this. And I got a lot of no's. I I was told you can't do both. You should have started earlier. You're too old to get in this late time of your career. I was early 30s. Most people getting out of college when they go into their first small market television job are what, 23, 24. Here I
Hmm.
am behind 10 years of people my age having 10 years under their belt of television, and I'm starting in like as green as can be. And I go into an editing bay with this wonderful friend of mine. His name is Dan Bach. And he wanted to make sure that helping me was above board with his news director. So he asked him, hey, there's this reporter that I want to help on my day off. Is it okay if she comes in and I put a demo together for her? So on a day off, his day off, my day off, I went in there and we pumped out, which is pretty hard to do on that kind of deadline stress. But in one afternoon, I pumped out a demo tape with 3 packages. I
Wow.
sat and wrote. The stand-ups had been done. He saved the video. I pumped one out. I voiced one out. He put it together in the editing bay. It was hours. And the news director kept walking by the editing bay as he tells me, like I was oblivious to all of this. But he says, hey, my news director is interested in your demo. I think he's interested in something. I don't know, Sandra. I'm just letting you know. I was like, wow, like, no, I'm not ready for Dallas. He actually hired me. Like, I got a call maybe a couple weeks later to be a fill-in weekend reporter. He
Wow.
wanted nothing else but packages. I didn't have to do any live shots,
Right.
but he liked my radio work. And I think he saw that I won some awards I was winning awards. That was a big deal. I worked at a station called WBAP. We submitted a lot of journalism awards. It's good for branding and bragging rights. They like that. So I would submit things. So I had some awards, and it was a great experience. But it was hard work because I still had my full-time radio job. So, but
Mm-hmm.
the things you do and the sacrifices you make. So that's how I got started. And then eventually I came to the knowledge and the realization that, well, some people have started their television career in Dallas. I needed to go to a smaller market and really work out some of the mechanical kinks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was very easy for me to, hold up a phone. They were very much bulkier and bigger in the days, and just talk and move around and walk. I'm a pacer when I'm on the phone, and I use my Latina hands. Well, you can't do that on TV. So it's not just journalism, but you literally need to have the comfort level to talk into a camera with all those bright lights on you and things that can happen. I've stood in fire ants. I've had weird things happen to me in the middle of live shots, and it's like, you know, it's the best decision I ever made. I
Mm.
ended up going to Bakersfield, which is in my home state of California, and it was the best experience. I loved it. I was there for 4 years, but that was like my first full-time, real gritty television job outside of radio.
Yeah.
Again, later in life, when I had so many people tell me no. They tell me you just can't do it. I had somebody tell me, literally grab my face and tell me, girl, if you want to get into TV, you're going to have to lose some weight. Like, just such negativity. So, but
Mm. It's, and I've had a lot of friends who've done television like you, and I tried it for a little bit, and I mean, I'm not going to say that it was fun, but I don't know. Maybe I was just more comfortable sitting in front of a microphone, and I think literally, like where I am most comfortable is in a studio, in front of a microphone. I was always a very shy guy. And so going out and talking to people was not easy for me. But there's something weird when I'm in a studio that's gone. Is I'm a different person and I feel in control and I feel more relaxed.
you're in your element.
I guess that, so I've said this is where I need to be. This is my thing. But when you switched over to television, and I loved how you were describing it earlier. Look, you're still a storyteller, but now you're using a different medium. Um, for you, what was that change like for you? Because you spent a decade in radio, making that switch over, and how do you describe to people, the average person, like what's that process for you? What are you thinking about as you're telling a story, but you're doing it with a camera? What's the process like for you?
One thing that worked for me that I found has always been a good formula for capturing people is peopleizing it, personalizing it, finding somebody to tell the story through rather than just talking about it. There's like just the facts, ma'am, type reporters. And then there's the reporter who finds the person who's completely affected by the rising water rates. You know, I don't know. That's what makes journalism so great, and having so many different faces and bylines and reporters and such. So we all bring something different to the table. So for me, I felt like the personalization and something emotional, like one of our guru guys in journalism is L. Tompkins. He's there in Florida
Mm-hmm.
at
Mm-hmm.
Pointer. Is Aim for the Heart. It's the name of his book, and he hits the nail on the head, so to speak. I mean, you gotta make people feel, or why should they even bother watching? Like you gotta
Right.
like, and it's not for the sake of making them feel, but if you're gonna have an impact, you want people to feel something, not be bored, or I don't know how to explain it, but it's just some kind of gift I feel that Oh no, I can make people talk. People talk to me, and sometimes it's too much information. Like, whoa, I didn't expect all of that. And men would cry, and it was powerful,
Uh,
and it came through in television just like it did in radio.
how did people respond to you? You're out there on the field, and maybe you're wearing your press badge, but at least if anything, I mean, they see your microphone and camera and all that. How did usually people respond to you, and how did you handle that?
It varied because I mean, think about it. We are there on their worst day or their best day. They don't know us. They don't think of us as humans, um, and sometimes they do. So when there's a lot of anger, like after a murder or something in a neighborhood. I used to cover a lot of crime, especially in New Orleans. That anger has to be directed. And you come over there and you disrupt the environment just by your presence. You come in, you're dressed nice, you're carrying all this electronic equipment, there's lights. I mean, you can put yourself in some precarious situations.
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, the family who just lost a loved one is all of a sudden really mad at you, and you're
yeah.
invading their property while you're out on the street. Clearly, the street is not their property, but just they get really angry at you. And then, like the last decade, we've become some sort of a scapegoat for something. The media. Well, what does that mean? You know, it's the media's fault. And then because they probably have never met anybody who works in the communications industry of any sort, all of a sudden you're the media and it's your fault. And so sometimes you come across that. And then sometimes you're like treated like royalty. They're so happy that you're there to tell the story, and they'll roll out the red carpet and, make a big deal about it. And they'll say, Miss Gonzalez, I just love you so much from your reports. Can I get your autograph? And you're like happy to do it for, a 9-year-old girl who's got dark hair and brown skin. And she's, I don't know. It varied.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No,
You got to have a thick skin and a compassionate heart. This is hard work.
mm-hmm.
It's hard mentally and emotionally because you become like this cup, right? And they pour all their pain or celebration or concern, or a lot of times we're in these chaotic situations. They're pouring that all into you. And no one even addressed that until like maybe the last decade, that,
Right.
maybe we need to deal with some of this stuff. I'm very happy to see that, you know.
And how have you, I mean, in all the things you've seen, everything that you've, as a reporter, you've reported on, you know, maybe people forget, yeah, we're humans, and we have to. I think that's a beautiful way to say it. We're just like a cup, and we go home at the end of the night. We're filled with all this stuff that we had to see and constantly report. I think this is the other thing too. Is like, you know, the average person, if you're tired of it, turn it off.
Right.
I envy my mom because she has a diet of news. And when she's done, when she's consumed her news, that's it. It's off. She goes on about her day. And people like you and me, we don't have that luxury every
Mm-mm.
day, over
Every
and over.
day.
How do you? I mean, for you over the years, what have you learned about how to deal with that?
I learned that I couldn't professionally lose it on the air. Well, I spoke with a tender voice when it was needed, a tough voice when it was needed. When I got home, sometimes barely even getting out of the long driveway of the company where I worked, they had this long driveway. I'd barely make it to the end where you turn on the street, and then the flood, just like a wash. Um, I have my own life outside of journalism. So, like, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, and I'm a woman of faith. And I always have made friends in my church community wherever I live, and they become my pillars. And that's been helpful.
Yeah.
You know, we all got to have something outside of this because this is hard. It's hard
Mhm.
on your heart. I'm not, I mean, like, it's just that too. But I mean, it's just hard. It's an emotionally exhilarating, mental. It's a hard, not everybody can do this job.
I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying.
It
Um,
is intense.
yeah, I remember we had here in South Florida, it was over a period of a couple of years, we had a hurricane, which, and I've only been through a few different like natural disasters, but the hurricane, I don't know. I haven't been through a lot of other ones, but the hurricane I think is the worst one because you see it coming and you see it coming and you're waiting and then you get through it and then the aftermath and it drains you. And then we had within that couple of years it was the hurricane and then it was the school shooting. It was the Parkland school shooting and that was so much. That was just so much. And not even a month and a half later there was a bridge collapse. And it's just like, and then of course last year we had, the Surfside condo collapse. I'd have to say over these last few years, like it's just been, and when those things happen, I don't need to tell you, but just to say, it's like you take a deep breath because you're like, okay, for the next few weeks or however long this is going to be, this is all we're going to be talking about. And yeah, you have to find something after work to escape yourself. There's no question. And I appreciate you sharing, by the way, your experiences. Let's switch things up a little bit. Something interesting, and you've had the chance to see this as well. And I wondered about one of the gigs that you had where you were working, I believe, doing a lot of digital work, and you go from a life where you're rolling with carts and reels and the old stuff, and now everything is become digital and social media and all this stuff. I don't know everything you've seen change in the business. What's the good? What's the bad? Do you like it? Has it been good for journalism?
I love it. I wanted to do it before I was allowed to do it. Um, I don't know what I thought. I just didn't think it was like something I wanted to do. Do you remember the first one? It was MySpace. Like the people on it were like, no, that's probably not for me. And then I remember one of my anchors talking about Facebook. I'm like, what is that? And I always want to know what's the pulse and what's going on. And it was starting to spread. But I worked at a company that was like, absolutely not, and put up firewalls. And it probably wasn't the only one. It just, when you don't understand something.
Right.
And so only certain employees had access to the internet. And I wanted to share my stories because when you move around as a journalist, you are like not national, you're national. You got friends all over different
Mm-hmm.
states. And I found it by accident trying to find a roommate to go to a journalism conference. They go, well, if you want to connect, get on Facebook. And then all of a sudden, I get all these friend requests. And I was like, what in the world? I love this. I'm like reconnected immediately to people I hadn't talked to in forever. And so I wanted to find a way to be able to share my stories. And so I thought digital, digital. And immediately I started to befriend people who were like kind of this department, maybe one or two people. That was a high priority, and I've been doing that probably since the early 2000s, and I always wanted to make sure that I could have my story on the web and help them write it because I think it was just another tool for people to reach people.
Yeah.
And a lot of the reporters were like, no, I'm not going to have any extra work to do. I'm done. My 5 o'clock live shot, I'm done. I'm not going to worry about the web. No way, man. And so the the digital team, which was usually like one or two people, maybe three if they were lucky, were thrilled to have a reporter interested in sending them a script. And so, like, I don't know, that's the way I've always been about anything new. And then it became big. Then all of a sudden, we all had to get Facebook accounts, and everybody wanted a blue check, right?
Right.
And everybody wanted Twitter followers, because if you had a whole bunch of Twitter followers, you were successful. It didn't matter that they were from like across the across the pond, and didn't know you, and they were just an egghead. It was just a matter of numbers. I don't know. It just kind of went in a weird direction, but I found it really useful, and for different reasons. Like, I like Twitter for news and breaking news and stuff. I find that I get a lot of great information on my feeds, and it's a good place to put that.
Yeah.
Facebook has a different vehicle, and I even like Instagram, and then all the other ones that have come and gone, and you don't know if they're going to stay or not. And like I was telling you, I love TikTok, but I wanted, like, how many things do anyways. um I got hired in Houston in 2017, or no, maybe it was 2018, one of those years, um, as a temporary fill in the digital department as a social media producer.
Hmm.
I was really excited about it because I really love social media. And it was hard work. I had to do something completely different, and they still hired me, even though I had very little experience in it. I really trained myself real quickly how to write AP style.
Right.
Okay, so AP style is the newspaper way of writing,
Yeah.
and AP, for those that are watching that are not in the journalism industry, it's Associated Press style writing, newspaper print writing for the eye. But in broadcast, we write like we talk. It's more conversational,
Yeah.
shorter, and there's different rules. Like in broadcast, we'll say so and so says, and in print, it's like d comma quote said da da da. It's a little different, but it's still storytelling.
Right.
And so, my gosh, what a whirlwind of deadline stress, excitement. But man, that was one great digital department, Luis, and they did everything. They had Facebook Lives, they had live streaming, they had their own digital studio, so people could come in and then they, well, Sandra, you've been on TV. Can you interview so and so? And I would do it just for the web. And then they were teaching me how to do stories on Instagram, which was kind of neat because then you can do them in 4 parts.
Yeah.
And then it promotes the television story. Lots of stuff. They're doing a really great job. I loved being part of it. And so I was there for a while, and it was, what an experience. And
There's
they'd send me out with my phone, and my phone was to follow. One time it was a lot of fun. From NBC, they came down. I can't think of his name right now. He's a news anchor. He came, Lester Holt, and he
Oh.
came down to do a story on the origin of fajitas in Houston. It was a really fun day, and I was paid to go follow him. And he was in Houston, making Houston shine on the
Wow.
NBC, all of their platform, and I loved that job. It was great.
I'll be the first to admit that. I mean, there's a lot that I'm still trying to learn, and of course the challenge is that working in radio, it's like how do we translate that sometimes into like into social media? Sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's not. But here's one question that I want to hear from you about is one of the challenges obviously that we face as journalists is that especially with Facebook and Twitter is there is so much misinformation because obviously now anybody could post. And I don't remember where I saw this, but I think the last thing I saw was a couple of years ago was for every story that a journalist will post that's accurate and true, there's like 8 or 9 stories that are false, that are lies. And so it's, I mean, maybe it affects me, and I feel like I'm climbing a hill here. Like no matter what I do, there's 10 times as much baloney out there, and it's a hard climb. It's a hard fight. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
It's out there, it's on the web, it's disguised as news.
Right.
They use bylines. They put out information and people were like they're looking for something that might already fill where they're kind of already believing. And so they'll repost it as gospel. And it's kind of dangerous because sometimes people who are just like not even connected actually will believe some of this stuff and it's not accurate.
Hmm.
And it's like one of my goals is to help people understand news literacy, you know? And then sometimes that's challenging because we have a growing mindset that all journalists have some kind of agenda, a political agenda, and
Right.
therefore we can't read or listen to this thing and that thing because they're behind a certain candidate. Oh, so it's a challenge, and we, and as an industry, we need to keep fighting to help people understand how to get accurate information, be
Yeah.
better news consumers, and we have to do a good job.
You know what? That leads me to my last two questions. Is what could we be doing better as journalists to help people understand who we are and what we do? And it's not about being popular because and you know someone I talked to recently said, "You look, we're not. It's not a popularity contest. We're here as watchdogs, and sometimes we're not going to be liked for that. But at least to help people understand, what we really do. What's our purpose? Is there something we're not doing right in getting the message across?"
A couple of things come to mind. First of all, we need to diversify our newsrooms. We need to be bringing in a different, more rich culture of people with different perspectives to tell stories that need to be told. We can't be telling the same old, same old. We can't be reaching the same experts. We need to do a better job of that. There's a lot of things going on in the world that are never covered. We have a lot of invisible communities that we need to make visible. We as journalists, we as decision makers, we as newsroom leaders, and we need to start showing other perspectives. Stop making things so black and white or two-sided. Start showing things in shades of gray. There may not be a solution. We need to let people know we're so hugely important. And some people say we're the fourth branch. In a way, think about it. How did we find out about some of the most historic events in the world? Because of a journalist. How
Yeah.
do we know that a hurricane is coming? Did we find that on a blog? No. A news media company was on top of it with extremely credible journalists, meteorologists, people bringing life and death information. Newsrooms are crucial during crisis. How do we find out about missing children? How do we find out about, so much important information. We're there for them for the elections. Where do they turn to get election results? Who's going to be in the courtrooms? Are they going to spend hours? No, they depend on us. We're vital. We're a vital, thriving industry. And with all the things going on in the world and with all this technology, at least we're global. Everything that happens on the other side of the world has direct impact on the United States and probably someone in our own hometown.
Yeah. You know what? And what you said leads me to my last question. In all the years you've been in the business, um, are we doing a better job being diverse? Have we gotten better? I'd like to think we're making strides somehow, right? Or no?
I I see it. we could do a better job, but I'm seeing it. What I'd like to see is a different change in more changes in the managerial level. We have a lot of boots on the ground. We have a lot of diverse people in the front lines doing the hardcore journalism, but they're like, if you think of it as a military, maybe in a chain of command, they're the soldiers,
Yeah.
right? You know, I always say I'm out there in the trenches. That's kind of like a soldier-ish kind of thing to say with all the years that I was reporting. I'm producing now, so I'm wearing a different hat, and I like it. I'd like to see more people of different backgrounds in management, good
Hmm.
leaders, good leaders. You know, leaders don't even need a title. If you're um, a go-to person, you're a leader.
I agree.
So
I
I
agree.
hope I hope we see some of those changes, I'm always pushing to bring in fresh blood, newer generations, because there's so much going on in the world, and there's so much corruption, and there's so much being not told to us that we need some good journalists. We really do. We got to bring them in, and we got to keep them. We're losing them. They're
Yeah.
getting out of the industry within 5 years. They're not lasting as long as we'd love them to.
You know what? Thank you for saying that. And if I may, is in your experience, how long does the average person stay, and why are they leaving? I mean, how you've stuck around, how I've stuck around as long as we have. But what do you see?
I think it's my personality. I'm a very stick to it person. I'm very resilient, strong woman, strong personality. You just make things work. You make things work in your fishbowl. I find that it's hard on them mentally,
Hmm.
and they just want a break. They want to try something else. It is hard. It's a really hard job. Not
Yeah.
everybody can do this. It's hard. It can be very fulfilling, and it can be emotional and exhilarating, depressing. It goes up and down. Like you were saying, Luis, the mass shootings. One of them happened in Fort Worth when I was a radio reporter, marked me for life. It was my first experience with it. A gunman went into the Wedgwood Baptist Church, and I lived that for 3 weeks straight.
Yeah.
Now these things are so common. Our reporters, and we call them MMJs, the ones who shoot and edit their own stories, they're, they're they're thrust into the protests. They're thrust into the political anger. They're being yelled at. They feel like probably threatened by violence a lot, especially during some of the protests they cover. And I remember being really afraid for crews during the political campaign when I worked at some of the stations. The crews were being threatened by some of the supporters.
Yeah.
And what we saw happening to the media on January 6th, it's a hard job. I understand it. I see a lot of people getting out and doing things in the communications industry, just not journalism.
Right.
And I feel sad because some of these people were phenomenal reporters. Like, don't leave us, don't leave, stay.
No, you're right. No, and I think, like I said, I think that's why a lot of the times I really appreciate being in a studio. I actually don't want to let you go before, because you said this to me, and this is a beautiful point too. Is there's the idea of what a journalist is supposed to be, which is objective, and we're not part of the story. We have to stay distant and disconnected, and in some cases, okay, yeah, but there are a lot of journalists who are part of the story, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, depending on the story. But you were telling me that this happened to you at one point. It's happened to you many times, but that was a story you wanted to tell me.
Last year, 1 year ago, we got a storm, which, is nothing to probably people in the East or the North. But for Texas, the temps were historically low.
And there was the big ice storm, the big snow ice storm that you had in Texas that covered a big part of Texas, and then there was a big power
Hmm.
outage.
We thought it was going to be like a couple of days. They said, "Hey, Sandra, pack an overnight bag if you want, maybe an extra set of clothes just in case." The girl and me packed three. They kept us at a hotel because we were really going to have very icy roads, which is super dangerous to drive in. And when you're not used to that, you don't know, and you're going to have a lot of bad things happen, wrecks and deaths and such. We didn't think about the grid. We didn't think about the impact on the water system. So it was the weekend before Valentine's. I walked out of my home with a suitcase, thinking I'm coming back in a couple of days. I never came back. It was destroyed. It froze. Everybody lost power, almost everybody. There were parts of Texas that had a better situation, but most of Texas depended on the main grid that went down. And there's millions of people with no heat. They were trying to make sure they could get in their car to turn the heater on to stay alive. And we lost our water. The water systems went down because it's dependent on electricity, and that was a whole mess. So we had the frozen, and then in the thaw, we needed water. And then the pipes, because when we do our weather stories, we say the 3 or 4 P's: the pipes, the pets, something else, the plants. The pipes were bursting all over Texas.
Mm.
And it caused such horrible damage. Like, fire causes damage, well, so does water. My home was destroyed from the top down. And I worked many years and covered the story of Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana. Their waters rose, so they had a lot of water damage from a different way. Mine was from the top down.
Wow.
And I learned from them it's just stuff, but it was emotional. So
Hmm.
assessing all that damage has been challenging. The mildew, the memories, the mold, working with insurance companies, living in hotels for weeks, and covering the story. It's very, and it's good though, we go through these things because then we have empathy for other people that are going through it, because we're humans too. We
Hmm.
have families. We're not just the job. We're people. Sometimes we're not seen that way, but we're humans too. But I'm
Absolutely.
getting through it. Got a new home. I'm trying to think of the
Yeah.
the lemonade out of all of this. New home, new things.
Yeah.
Got to buy some new things, and you keep moving. You keep moving forward. You get stronger. But yeah, I'm part of those millions of Texans you hear about who went through the freeze.
That I have a couple friends and some family in Texas, and it was you just hear those stories, and it was weird because I thought, really, Texas? I'd believe this if you were in Minnesota, and it was just but it was heartbreaking to hear some of that stuff, and so I'm glad you're doing all right. You got a smile on your face. You're doing better, and that's all
I'm
that
doing
matters.
great,
Good,
And
Sandra.
you look great too and wonderful. You got a nice glow through. I think life's treating you good in Florida, and I'm so glad I got to spend time with you. For people watching, Luis and I met covering news when we were in Las Vegas.
Those old Las Vegas days.
Mhm.
They were interesting to say the least. No question about it. Well, Sandra, it's such a pleasure, and I really appreciate you sharing so much with us today. And thanks for being in the reporter studio.
I've enjoyed our chat. Thanks for
All right,
inviting me.
definitely.